Hey, what's up? Hello, everyone. Welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
My name is Dyl, and it's been a little bit since we've done a What Have We Been Watching video, but we are back here. We're going to switch up a little bit. Instead of doing it every week, we're going to do it once a month. So this is the What Have We Been Watching for the month of January. As you know, Matt watches a lot of movies.
Yeah.
I don't watch as much, so we're not going to hit on every single movie that we've watched for this month. If you are interested in that, go down to the description box down below. Our letterboxes are linked, as well as a link to Discord, where we always usually post our thoughts on the movies that we're watching. But Matt, how should we start this week?
Well, let's find some common ground, because I've seen 29 films this month, and that's not including the short films that I watched for preparation for my short film Oscar prediction video. And you've seen 14 movies, and I think the main overlap is in the new 2024 releases. I went out and saw Mean Girls today. I know you didn't like it. I really liked Mean Girls. It was a lot of fun. While Angourie Rice was definitely a little miscast for the role or just misdirected, I really liked her performance overall, but I didn't love her choices in the singing. That was a little bit too soft, while everyone else was kind of just out there and pushing it. Renee Rapp was really good. Auli Cravalho was fantastic. I'm a huge fan of the original Mean Girls. This definitely scratched an itch. Now, one thing I will say about this movie, something that makes it a major downgrade from the first one. The first movie has this sort of mean sense of humor to it, right? It's Mean Girls, and the girls be mean. Tina Fey's sense of humor is mean, and in this one, you don't have that same bite. It always feels a little bit tame, a little bit neutered, and it can never really live up to the original because of that, because they're trying to be a little bit too nice.
If you're a subscriber here to the channel, you would have saw I put out a quick little 1-minute movie review for Mean Girls, where I said the original Mean Girls is one of my favorite comedies of all time, and you kind of hit the nail on the head here. This one just doesn't really compare to it, and I don't care this is a musical. I love musicals, but when your musicals don't have good songs, which to me, I only enjoy like 2 or 3 songs here being Sexy, Revenge Party, and I'd Rather Be Me. It's a real hard thing to get through. I found myself occasionally laughing, but maybe not the reasons why I should be laughing. I really like Janice, Damien, and especially Karen. I felt like they really carried the movie, but I feel like there were some major miscastings here. I agree with Katie. I would say Aaron just is a bland, has nothing to do with the actor they cast, and I'll take some flack from the community here. I don't think Renee Rapp was the right choice for Regina George. I think that she's a great singer. I think she's a great actress, but she doesn't fit this character. You're not supposed to want to root for Regina. When Renee Rapp's Regina, you want to root for Regina.
Really?
You think Katie's the villain. That's not
I
how
disagree.
I really want to take Mean Girls. Whenever Renee Rapp was on screen, I was like, oh yeah, she's so cool. She has such a warm presence. I want to be her friend. I want to be in the plastics. It wasn't ever like, oh, she's a jerk. She's mean. She's ruthless. Why would people like her? And I think that's kind of the point of Mean Girls. And when you fail on that thing, it's kind of hard to get behind this movie.
I'm actually a little surprised to hear you say some of that, because I felt the exact opposite about Renee Rapp, where I actually felt like she went too mean just in the attitude of it all. Because I think the thing with the Regina George character is that you do have to feel a little bit swooned by her, because even though she's the worst person, everyone wants to be her friend. And the way Rachel McAdams played that was that even though she was terrible, she'd be stabbing your back with a smile on her face. I know so many mean girls who are exactly like the Rachel McAdams version, where, you know, they're mean, but they're only mean if you really get to know them. Whereas the way Renee Rapp played it was a little bit too in your face, just like, I am being mean to you, I am being rude, I am yelling at you. I didn't feel like I could ever see myself falling for that. I don't think I could ever see myself being like, I want to be one of the plastics, the way that you said, you know, you might. Whereas I totally can see how the Rachel McAdams version, she's just not surface level mean enough that like you could fall for it if you didn't really see how awful she was under the surface.
To continue with the trend of 2024 movies, the one that I did hate myself watching was Night Swim. I'm going to be really quick.
You did it to yourself.
I did do it to myself. It's our typical January release. space horror film. I mean, sometimes they're big hits, usually they're misses, and this one was definitely that. It had a fun premise for the first hour, but the last 30 minutes of this movie, I don't even want to say it takes a swing and a miss. I think it just falls flat on its face. At least Megan last year, while I didn't really like that, I at least was entertained throughout. Fantasy Island was at least dumb fun, and Insidious The Last Key at least had like some scares. Night Swim was just a boring snoo fest throughout. But to redeem myself, just the last new 2024 movie I'm going to talk about here is The Book of Clarence, and James Samuel is quickly becoming one of my favorite directors. So far, both of his films have had such originality. The Book of Clarence features some witty comedy, a great conversation around the topic of religion and faith, and as all of his films so far have had a great ensemble. It's no secret on this channel, Lakeith Stanfield's one of my favorite working actors today, and I think he shines as Clarence. Omar Sy, RJ Cyler would be some of the highlights from me, and we have some hilarious cameos from James McAvoy, and probably the best one we're going to see all year from Benedict Cumberbatch, which is so out of left field, but works so well, and it just tackles what this subject of this movie tries to end on, I think, perfectly well, which I think is going to be a tough that comes up again when we get to this Martin Scorsese Jesus movie. One thing I think both of Samuel's films have so far that this one sadly falters to is pacing. This one's a lot shorter than Harder They Fall, but feels almost as long. The first act is so slow, you don't really get the point of the movie, but once Clarence finds his true calling, that's when I think this starts to knock it out of the park. It's one that if you haven't seen it in theaters because it's basically gone now, I'd really recommend to whatever streaming service it comes to.
I have not been to movie theaters much, so Mean Girls is really the only 2024 release that I've actually gone out of my way to see at this point.
Beekeeper.
I haven't even seen The Beekeeper, but I have gone to the theaters to rewatch a few things. I got to rewatch Poor Things, I got to rewatch American Fiction, I got to rewatch The Zone of Interest, and I got to rewatch Killers of the Flower Moon. So I know we rewatched a lot of the same stuff, and we won't go too deep into these because we're planning on releasing full videos for every single one of the Best Picture nominees this year. But I will say my one takeaway from this bunch of rewatches is I liked American Fiction even more this time watching it again. The satire extended even deeper, almost to a meta level where there's layer upon layer upon layer of what Cord Jefferson's doing. It almost feels like the movie is extending its practical joke into the real world, that this film is an elaborate joke being played on the Oscar voters. I just respect that so much. I loved it. Did you have any big changes of mind on your rewatches?
My biggest takeaway is Killers of the Flower Moon on the second rewatch. I actually watched that today, and it worked a lot better for me this time around. I see more of a case for Gladstone this time around. I still do agree that she's gone for about 90 plus minutes where she's just not doing anything, but when she is on screen, she's so magnetic. Any other year, I would be like, oh yes, give her the award, but my rewatch of Poor Things did tell me that Emma Stone has the best performance of the year in any category. Just to touch on Barbie real quick, I like this the most. This is my fourth time watching Barbie, and it's the first time I'm giving it a 9 out of 10.
Oh, wow. What a bump up.
I guess to touch one more thing about Killers is my most anticipated thing with rewatching this movie would be how does it sound this time around? It still sounds like shit, and I still liked it.
It was better on my TV, is what I'll say, because I didn't get it to the theater for that one. I saw it in Apple TV, and I didn't have any sound mixing problems, whereas I did have those sound mixing problems when I was in the theater.
This time around, there was moments where it was just overtly loud with Robbie Robertson's score, and other times the score was like this the whole time, and like you could hear that the score is there, but you can't really hear the score at all. There's still problems which keeps me from raising my score, but I did connect with the rest of the film overall. Moving away from 2023, 2024 films, I know that you have watched a lot of stuff from the 80s. Anything that you really want to highlight for this time right here?
Oh, well, let me just run through. I've got some new 10 out of 10s. I've been watching a lot of 80s films because I'm just working my way backwards in time and trying to close off some blind spots. So the films that really blew me away this month, Running on Empty is the first one that I watched this year. Think Coda, except instead of the main character belonging to a family of deaf fishermen, instead it's about a kid who lives with fugitives, and he's desperate to find his own way in life, and he's desperate to play music, but he has to move from place to place every few months. River Phoenix plays the teenage boy who is trying to escape this life. It is beat for beat exactly Coda, except I would say it's 10 times better. It is heartfelt. The performances are brilliant. River Phoenix broke my damn heart in this movie. This one in my opinion, is a masterpiece. Then I watched The Last Temptation of Christ, the Martin Scorsese film, which is another frickin' masterpiece. This is one that I'd been meaning to watch forever. It's got Willem Dafoe playing Jesus Christ. You've got a Paul Schrader script. You've got Martin Scorsese directing, and they made a Jesus movie that feels like a Martin Scorsese movie. It feels like Taxi Driver. It feels like Raging Bull. You've got this character who's flawed, who's human, who goes through this journey to become human. I can absolutely see why the Catholic Church hated this movie so much that they banned it and called it blasphemous. It's all the more brilliant because it has that sort of edge to it. Another one that I loved this month was the Tom Cruise movie Born on the 4th of July. This is a biopic about a Vietnam veteran who, after being paralyzed in the war, he comes back to America and realizes how terribly veterans have been treated and becomes a patriot in a new way, fighting for the rights of veterans and fighting for peace in Vietnam. Oliver Stone won Best Director for this, and it was so well deserved. I also watched The Unbearable Lightness of Being. This one has Daniel Day-Lewis in it and Juliette Binoche. It is a very long movie, but it's very romantic. It's a very sensual film. Also, one of the best edited films I've seen by Walter Murch, who did Apocalypse Now. Stellar, stellar, stellar. And then some 1980s films I was a little bit less excited by. The Abyss was a James Cameron movie.
No.
It's the first time I have not liked a James Cameron movie. I have given a 10 or a 9 to every other James Cameron movie, and I found this one to be quite dull. I feel like if you remove the central catalyst for the conflict, the alien that they meet in this movie, all of the events of this story would be the exact same. And to me, that's a failure in storytelling. And then there was Little Dorrit, which I thought was very interesting. And I'm only mentioning Little Dorrit here because it has the interesting trivia point of until OJ Made in America, this was the longest film ever nominated for an Oscar at 6 hours long. So you know I had to watch it. But wow, that was a long movie. The first 3 hours, fantastic, flew by. The next 3 hours, that was a really hard watch at the end. But the first half is so goddamn good that it might be worth checking out just for that. And it's also worth checking out for the little fun fact of being like, ooh, I've seen both the longest films ever nominated for an Oscar.
Well, it only took me 24 years to watch the cult classic from the legendary, should-be Oscar-nominated director that is Kenny Ortega, because I watched High School Musical 1, 2, and 3 all in a row. High School Musical 1, it's not a perfect film, but it knows exactly what it needs to be, and therefore it is a perfect film. I had a blast from this. I was a little upset Zac Efron was not singing the first movie. Those issues are fixed in part 2 and part 3, but I sure dig almost all of these songs in the first one. The comedy works for me, even though it's super over the top. Just everything clicked, and the drama. Oh, I love the drama in this one, and I was very excited to see what arc Troy and Gabriella's relationship would grow throughout. And I mean, Sharpay, another quotable for these people out there. She serves cunt. She's probably the funniest part of these movies. And I will say that Chad is the cringiest little dude in the world because he has to go everywhere. I wish I had a basketball next to me. Holding his basketball, like, we get it, dude. You hoop. At least to me, as someone who used to play basketball, if you walk around with a basketball, probably means you're not good at basketball. But I digress. We move into High School Musical 2, and guess what? Chad, he still has his basketball, even though he is cooking. Why is he holding a basketball in the kitchen? I will never know, but this one...
Ball is clearly not life for you.
Ball's clearly not life for me, you're right, but High School Musical 2 seems to be most people's favorite. This was my weakest of the bunch. I thought it looked a lot cleaner from the first movie. The choreography was a step up. I thought the plot, the drama, the songs, the characters, just all to be a little bit less engaging. I still had fun, but I wasn't loving every second of it like I was doing with High School Musical 1. Taking them out of the school, putting them into a new setting was a cool idea on paper. It just didn't really work for me overall. Chad continues to be a loser, and Sharpay continues to slay anything she does. Now we get to High School Musical 3, senior year, and as someone who films dance for a living, I have to admit, Kenny Ortega choreographs some great numbers, and he films them in really cool, really interesting ways. I talked about Magic Mike's Last Dance last year as a movie that does it very interesting. High School Musical 3 knocks that out of the park. My favorites here would probably be some of my favorites in the series overall. Night to Remember, The Boys Are Back, I Want It All. Just everything that's going in, the production of it, the costumes, the camera, the sound of it all. It's just a chef kiss. You want to know what happens in this movie? Chad, he moves away from holding his basketball. Instead, he's in a prom suit with his jersey number and his last name on the back of his suit. So again, he has to know that ball is life. But I really like this one overall. This might be the best of the three, even though I still like one more. Overall, I think this film could have used a little bit more Sharpay. I like to see that Ryan got some more screen time, but could always do a little less Gabriella nonsense, because every movie she kind of just whines, complains, or is overtly cheerful with no real substance to her character. But Vanessa Hudgens, cool girly. Zac Efron, though, carries. I see why he's a legend. And I like the High School Musical movie so much that on my flight to Atlanta the other day, I had to dive into one more Zac Efron movie, and that was 17 again. Who would have guessed that he grows up to be the ugly loser guy from Friends? That was a very big revelation for me in this film. I guess this is what Troy Bolton would get up to if he didn't have singing in his life. He's able to make edgy jokes, do risque things, and dress cool. There's this quote about there's a picture of Kevin Federline wearing the same thing, so it makes me look cool. I was like 10 years old when this came out, but I get that reference. That reference worked for me. And the "you look like Clay Aiken" dig, again, just worked for me. Zac Efron really shows his charisma in this film, but everything that's not involving Zac Efron was really boring and pointless. So I would say this is fun for a flight, but don't like go out of your way to watch 17 again.
Yeah, I think it's probably the same way. I haven't seen it since it first came out, and I don't know if I ever will watch it again.
10 Things I Hate About You. I'm not going to talk long about this. If you haven't seen it, because I hadn't, go out and watch it. It's great.
Masterpiece.
Future all-star cast. One of the best comedies of all time. And it met all the hype. It exceeded it. I would give this a very rare 5 stars from Dylan.
Yeah, it's a fantastic movie. 10 Things I Hate About You is one of the best high school movies ever. Glad that got 5 stars from you, because, yeah, it's so good. I've officially finished the Oscar death race. Literally, when nominations were announced, I'd seen every single film. So I would have missed a few if I hadn't caught up on some of these through January. So I watched American Symphony. Thought it was great. I was so shocked that, it didn't feel like a vanity project for John Batiste. It felt like so much more, so much deeper. Matthew Heineman's fantastic. I'm really sad this didn't get a documentary nomination, actually. And on the other end, Golda, it wasn't good, but it wasn't as terrible as people are saying. And you know what? Helen Mirren's makeup is really good. It deserved that nomination. It is a bad movie. I would give it a 4 out of 10, but I've seen people drop like 1 stars on this, half stars. I don't know if it's that terrible. It's just really bland. I expected it to be more propaganda than it was, is what I'd say. It was not as propaganda-y as I feared it would be.
I think that's probably where the 1 stars comes from, is whenever you have some sort of politics in the movie, you're always going to get people who immediately go 5 stars, 1 star, and they don't care if it's actual propaganda or not. Yeah, it's just a boring film, but it has really good makeup.
They make Helen Mirren disappear into that role. However, the movie is boring as shit, and that's the main problem with it. But you know what movie has more problems than that? Ferrari. Ferrari is awful. It is genuinely the only time in years that I've considered walking out of a movie because I was so bored and I felt like it was wasting my time. There's no plot here. It's just a series of events with nothing of consequence happening, and this is why I hate biopics. I have a pitch for you. Cut everything before that racing accident and make the entire film set in the weeks after that accident happens, as we see Enzo Ferrari deal with his personal life and deal with the guilt and the lack of accepting responsibility for this accident that happened. That is a compelling story, and it happens 5 minutes before the end of the movie. The first compelling incident in the entire movie, the first thing that gives us some actual conflict, 5 minutes from the ending. But if you set the entire thing around that and made it about Enzo Ferrari's inability to accept guilt, inability to see his flaws, that's a movie. Everything else here is boring filler. Now here's the one I was really surprised by. Flamin' Hot. Really damn good.
Movie.
Really damn good. I was shocked. Now, Diane Warren's song in this is not good, does not deserve a nomination, but this movie is a lot of fun. It has the crackling energy of those little Ant-Man bits where Michael Pena explains what happened, and we see all of these like people talking through Michael Pena's voice. All of Flamin' Hot has that same sort of energy. It's infectious. It's funny. It might be a little bit capitalist-y, bootstrapsy. You just have to, if you want to escape your working class life, you just got to lift yourself up by your bootstraps. It's got a little bit of that messaging, but it's so infectiously feel good, so funny, and so energetic that I just genuinely ignored a lot of that.
To circle back to Ferrari, I know I talked about it in one of our previous What We've Been Watching, but just some of the choices made in that movie are just so baffling, because sometimes it really works, and at other times you're like, why this
never
decision?
worked for me.
And I talked about at least I thought some of the racing scenes worked for me, but I get the rest of the film. I talked about killers having awful sound. What are some of these sound mixing stuff in Ferrari? And like the whole award season is like, oh, people are like, it's getting nominated. It has this crew that have had such pedigree in the past. How do you get a crew that talented? And that's the project they come up with the of the gravel as they're walking over top of Adam Driver's voice where you can't make out a word that he's saying. Well, I think to close out this What We've Been Watching episode, I should lose all my credibility with film Twitter, because I'm going to talk about two films I took forever to watch because they just didn't expand anywhere near me. In fact, I don't know if these movies have even opened near me yet. I saw these in Philadelphia because that's where they were showing when I was traveling there. The first one I'll talk about is All of Us Strangers, and there's all this talk about negativity to the ending, but my biggest issue with the screenplay, that the fact that they would say that Space Mountain would close at Disney because of rain. Like, come on, Andrew Hay, like, gotta know your Disney trivia here. That would never happen. But on a real note, I was not expecting to really like this film. These type of movies aren't always my type of things. I would say that was pretty true coming out of this. I thought the elements that were diving more into family really worked for me, but the elements more into the romantic side very much did not work for me. The performances are pretty good. Andrew Scott delivers, I think, his best film role that I've seen, and I found Jamie Bell to be really charismatic as the dad. But after the BAFTA nominations and praise from a lot of our peers, I was really disappointed in Claire Foy and Paul Mescal. Like, they weren't bad, but they weren't doing anything for me either. To me, I would give this like a strong 5. I admit there's a lot of great stuff going into it. It just didn't really work for me very much.
Question, do you think they could have been talking about Paris Disneyland, where it does rain and Space Mountain is partially outside?
Maybe, and if that's it, I'll rewrite this whole review and I'll be like, okay,
Maybe.
film is solved,
Now,
all my issues are solved.
I just looked it up. Paris Disneyland opened in 1992. I don't know how old the character is supposed to be in the film, but Andrew Scott himself would have been 16 when it opened, which wouldn't make sense because his parents died when he was 12.
To me, I didn't hate the ending. I actually kind of liked the ending, but I understand why people don't like it.
For me, it felt like my tears were reversing back up into my tear ducts. I knew it was coming because it's in the book. It happens in a very different way in the book, is what I'll say. Like, Paul Mescal's character is like an evil witch in the book. In the book. I'm not messing with you right now. Okay. Paul Mescal character is literally draining the life force of the main character, and they end up in like a full-on battle at the end. It's fucking wild.
That sounds a lot more interesting than the movie I watched. And on the flip side, maybe I get some points back. I have waited months to experience the Zone of Interest, and after all this buildup, I have to say, I walked out of this movie really confused. Overall, I thought this was brilliant in terms of the film's technical elements, and as I was told by you, Matt, it's a movie that moves very slow with little to help guide you through the film. Yes. But to steal your words in one of the reviews that you gave, because I think this really does sum up a lot of what this film has going for it, is Glazer's thesis here seems to be that there are two types of people, those on one side of the wall and those on the other. Some are subjected to violence and terror, others are aware violence is occurring yet do nothing, continue with their lives, which, at least to me, is the element that really stands out the most regarding Jonathan Glazer's intent with this newest effort. I found the elements regarding to like generational oppression rather fascinating. There's one scene, I don't think this is a spoiler all that much because there's not really much to spoil with this
really
movie,
not.
But the main character here is a Nazi. He's one of the heads of Auschwitz, and his kids see their dad do stuff, and the eldest son kind of follows in his footsteps. In one scene, he's dressed in full Nazi attire. He basically grabs his younger brother, drags him into the yard, throws him into their greenhouse, locks the door, and with how Glazer has the camera set up, it looks like the smoke from Auschwitz is coming from this greenhouse, and I feel like this element is very much echoed in some other scenes throughout the movie that may dive into a little bit more of spoilery territory, but I just think these elements are really what lifts this film up and sparks so many interesting discussions. It leaves me wanting to watch it again. It leaves me wanting to read the book to see the differences. It makes me want to talk with people, read other people's reviews to see what did they take away, what were their themes.
I did notice that when you first walked out of the movie, you gave it a 7 out of 10, but later I saw that you'd raised it to an 8 out of 10. Did you have a similar experience to the way I did, where I finished the film and I was like, I'm not sure how to feel about that, and then I just couldn't stop thinking of it day in, day out? It just stayed on my mind.
Yeah, I went to see this with a friend, and they were even more confused than me, and on the whole walk back, we were both just like, what did we really watch? We need to we need to read other people's stuff. And the more I went out, because I went to read like your Letterboxd review, I went to watch like Oscar Expert and Brother Bros and Film Drunk's YouTube quick reviews out of Cannes and TIFF, and just seeing other people's takes to add to kind of my holes of the story made me appreciate it more, made me more interested.
It's a great film, and it's one that I think is going to be really exciting to continue to unravel through the years. If any of these movies last for a very long time, continue to be rewatched, continue to be revisited, Zone of Interest is the one. When the next Sight and Sound list comes around, you bet your ass this is going to be top 100. But that brings us to the end of everything we've been watching through the month of January.
Yeah.
It's not everything we've been watching. You can go and check our Letterboxd for more details, more things that we skipped over. We definitely did not talk about everything, but we talked about most things. So if you're here, thank you so much for sticking with us. Make sure you drop a subscription. Make sure you drop a like, drop a comment. Let us know what you've been watching. And as always, my name is Matt.
My name is Dyl, and this is Fantasy Filmball.